Hi, welcome to Round 1 Boxing. Today we're going to have a look at the upcoming fight between Tony Bellew and David Haye on March the 4th, and see what we can make of it, try and predict what's going to happen. At the time of posting this, Bellew was a 4-1 underdog. Not huge odds, but still, majority of betting seems to be on a Haye stoppage in the early to middle rounds. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the factors involved with this fight. The main one really is the difference in power, which there is going to be a difference in power, and that's the biggest concern for Bellew. He's never fought at heavyweight, even though he's got a frame similar to David Haye. We don't know whether he's going to be able to trouble Haye with his punches. He's punched his harder since he moved from light heavy to cruiserweight, but will he carry that power to heavyweight? David Haye doesn't think so. He's already talked down Tony Bellew's power and said basically zero's going to happen if he hits him on the chin. Remains to be seen. Bellew's had 3 months to prepare for this fight since the fight was announced, and which is a decent amount of time to add a bit of power. If you think back to the 80s when Michael Spinks fought Larry Holmes for the heavyweight title, he was moving up from light heavyweight, 175 pounds, and he added a decent amount of strength and size in that time. I think he weighed in at 200 pounds, and he had the power to keep Holmes at bay, even though Holmes was past his best at that point. But it remains to be seen what Haye comes in at and what Bellew comes in at. Haye may well come in a little bit lighter, thinks he's got the power and the edge in power anyway, which he does have, so he may want a little bit more speed. The tail of the tape, so to speak, is pretty similar in terms of height and reach. I think Haye's a little bit, doesn't quite look 6'3", but he's listed at 6'3", so there's nothing really in the height. The reach is very similar. I think David Haye's got a couple of inches in reach advantage. Nothing drastically different there. Similar ages. The biggest difference in that is the fact that Haye's he's only fought 122 rounds as opposed to 200. So purely because he's got a better knockout ratio. He's obviously definitely the bigger puncher in those two. The next factor really is going to be, and this could be a crucial one, is the activity levels and the quality of the opposition. And if you look at Haye, he's been heavyweight for a good few years now, not had that many fights at heavyweight, simply because he's been retired and come out of retirement. He's been retired for 2 or 3 years, I think it is. But if you look at the quality of his opponents, the only really elite level fighter he's faced at heavyweight is Vladimir Klitschko. And in that fight he basically just skittered around the ring trying to avoid Klitschko's punches, throwing the odd right hand. Didn't really give a good account of himself at all in that fight, but there was quite a big difference in size there. If you look at his other opponents, he's fought John Ruiz, who was past his best. He was brought out of retirement. He was never that great anyway. He beat Evander Holyfield. He had a decent run as a heavyweight, but really he was just a very good journeyman. He did hold a version of the heavyweight title, but he stopped. Ruiz did, Haye, so that was a good result because Ruiz didn't get stopped very often. If you look at the fight where he won the title against Bellew, well, Bellew was more of a circus act than a boxer, really. He was freakishly tall. Doesn't really tell us much about Haye, only the fact that he can avoid punishment if he needs to. He's quite good at avoiding punches, and he's got good reflexes. If you look at probably the second best opponent Haye's fought at heavyweight, you'd have to say Derek Chisora. And that does look like quite a decent result, stopping Chisora, although the Chisora that Haye fought wasn't as good as the one that fought Dillian Whyte recently. I think if that version had been in the fight against Haye, it could have been a lot more difficult for Haye. So you look at his heavyweight fights that he's had, his opponents, the quality is quite slim. If you mention Hoadley Harrison in passing as well, that was, well, the less said about that, the better, really. I think Harrison only threw one punch in 3 rounds. If you look at Haye's comeback, he came back in 2015, November 2015. He fought Mike DeMori, who somehow had got a WBA rating of number 10, with a record of 32-1, I believe it was. Well, he really offered nothing. He didn't. He had decent. He looked like he could fight. A big, strong guy, but didn't really offer anything at all. I think 26 KOs, maybe 13 of those were against kangaroos. We don't know, unless you have to check his record. And the next fight he had was against the Swiss fighter Jajaj, I think is how you pronounce his name. Now the Swiss have always been a neutral country when it comes to fighting and wars, and I think this character was also a neutral. He didn't offer much at all in the way of any offence or any decent defence, to be honest. So there were Haye's opponents since he came back have been very, very much handpicked. They offered no threat really. Tony Bellew says or has said that Haye's been conning the public since he's come back. And he has. I mean, the events were sellouts. I think they were both held at the O2 Arena. But to be honest, they were more like public executions and fights. You know, they were not competitive at all. And some people think that this fight's going to be something similar, more like a public execution. Hopefully, for Bellew's point of view, it isn't. But if you look at Bellew, he's fought better quality opposition, albeit at cruiserweight. He hasn't fought at heavyweight yet. When he moved up from light heavyweight to cruiserweight, he fought Masterneck for the European title. He was a well-skilled fighter, a decent fighter, and Bellew won a unanimous decision in that fight, I believe. And then he fought Makubu, who was the favourite in that fight for the WBC title, the cruiserweight title, 2016, and Bellew showed a lot of fight in that fight, a lot of heart and power, which we hadn't seen that often at light heavyweight. So he seems to have got more powerful, and he showed that again against BG Flores in his last fight, which was a bit of a wild shootout, but he showed plenty of power in that fight. Will he take that up to heavyweight? That remains to be seen. So that's a factor that is going to decide really the whole fight. If he can hurt Haye, and if he can withstand Haye's punches for at least a while. If you look at the next category that is going to be a factor here, it's going to be heart and desire, and heart and guts. Has Haye had to dig deep in his career recently? No, you'd have to say no. He didn't dig deep against Klitschko. He just kind of ran around, basically. He has not been in trouble. He's not been seriously troubled by any fighter since 2007, which is 10 years, a decade ago. So where he fought at cruiserweight against Mohamed, who had him on the canvas. Haye showed some heart then and got back up and stopped Mohamed, I think, in the 7th or 8th round. But you have to ask, and the question has been asked, is Haye in it just for the money? Is it that or the limelight, or is it a combination of both? We don't know really. Only he knows that. So we don't know. If he has to dig deep, what's going to happen? Bellew, we know, is quite a passionate guy. Wears his heart on his sleeve. His last 2 fights have been like boring brawls. So we know he's willing to go to war. And, well, to be honest, that may not be the best strategy against someone with Haye's power. he might want to be a little bit more cautious than his last two fights. But yeah, I think it all depends on whether Tony Bellew can absorb the first time Haye lands a decent punch. If Bellew can absorb that punch, then we've got a fight in our hands. And if he lands something decent on Haye, and see how Haye reacts. If Haye feels any power, he does tend to be a bit cautious in fights. He doesn't stand and trade very often. He'll try and use his speed and reflexes and just pot shot with that big right hand. So that could be the way it's going to pan out. That's the interesting thing about this fight. We don't know that factor. But if Haye did lose, it would be humiliation really for him. He'd have nowhere to go really. What's he going to do next? Fight David Price or something like that? It could be the end. Whereas if Bellew did lose, if Bellew loses, he can put it down to the size difference. He'd probably say, well, bitten off a bit too much more than he could chew. Like Kell Brook did with Golovkin, and Kell Brook came out with a lot of credit in that after that fight, even though he lost by stoppage. He came out almost like a winner, if you will, because he landed some good shots against Golovkin. And so if he does that, if Bellew does lose, he could take the paycheck, have a couple more fights and then retire. Quite a decently well-off man. That would be, a nice ending to his career if he fought a couple of times. If he was to lose, that is. Okay, well, looking forward to March the 4th. It's going to be exciting while it lasts. Anyway, I think the atmosphere, you can probably cut it with a knife when it happens. So if you like the video, just click the like button if you would, and even subscribe if you feel so inclined. And I'd like to thank you for watching. Goodbye.